Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. Quick disclaimer, I'm no financial expert, no stock expert. Don't go and sell, trade, buy any of your stock based on my opinion. So here we have a great article from Yahoo Finance. I'll leave a link to it in the description so you guys can check it out. So these firms, quarter after quarter, continue to raise price targets on T-Mobile stock. And that is really just signaling the success of the company, right? A lot of this stuff is based on guidance and financial outlooks. And generally, well, not generally, usually T-Mobile hits their guidance, and they usually exceed the guidance because they most of the time, not most of the time, all the time, they underpromise and overdeliver. That's how they're always able to do the raise and beat quarters, and at the midpoint they're always able to increase guidance, because at the beginning of the guidance they always underpromise and overdeliver. That's been in the company's DNA since the beginning. Even on the network, they've always underpromised and overdelivered. That's how they were able to say we did it 6 months ahead of time, and all that verbiage that they've been using. That's how they've been able to present that to the market, and the market is buying it, and you can see it in the firms that are raising their price targets. T-Mobile, according to this price target being almost a $300 stock, is just crazy. And then what's next? What's next on these price targets? Because T-Mobile is still underrepresented in so many segments, right? I can't even begin to name how severely underpenetrated they are. It's really hard to put it into words, like publicly, like, right? If you say T-Mobile is starting to take share with T-Priority, what does that even look like, right? It's in the very low single digits. It's like 2 or 3% if we're talking first responders, right? And then same with the enterprise segment, right? The T-Mobile for government, all of that it's got to be in the low single digits. Then look at how much upside T-Mobile really has. I still think for a company that's big on marketing and overhyping and being loud, they're really not telling the street and the market how underrepresented they really are in these segments, right? The small market and rural areas, they got to 17. What was it? What's the last update? 17.5%. That's good. That's a good tailwind, but it still doesn't really represent how underpenetrated they are. They still have so much more to go, even just to get to fair share. Like, if you consider that 33% of 100%, right? They still have a long way to go to get to 33%, if that's considered a fair share, right? So, and that's the small market, rural areas, business. Like I said, the government section. Then you still have markets. T-Mobile made it very clear where they are number 2 and number 3, and there's still room to grow there. And they are still on the revenue per customer. They still aren't anywhere close at operation levels to Verizon and AT&T as it comes to margins and money they take in. Like I said, one big downside that T-Mobile won't be able to compete with is the additional revenue Verizon and AT&T make off of wireline. Right? T-Mobile would have to get heavily involved in wireline. They would have to heavily scale. And then T-Mobile still doesn't fully own and operate the wireline operation. Even after the close of Lumos and Metronet, they still don't fully own it. So that's why AT&T is able to say, we will have the largest owned and operated converged network in the country, because they will own everything. They will own every single piece of fiber going to the prem, and well, except the small deals that they're making, but most of the homes passed, they will own every single fiber going to the prem, and they will own every single strand of fiber that's hanging off of a small cell that's going onto the macro. They will own it, right? Now there's still some percentage where they do lease and third party, but it's getting smaller and smaller by the year, right? So, and same with Verizon. Verizon's going to own and operate their network, especially after Frontier. That they will own those assets, and they will go into a bigger converged pocket, and that's going to really put T-Mobile in the spotlight, right? That's what I don't think the analysts don't understand it. They do understand it, but most of T-Mobile's network is leased, right? They lease back a good chunk of 2.5. They lease all of their fiber. They lease all of their cell sites. It's like, what network do they really own, right? I had discussions about that last night. They just recently leased more 600 megahertz. Now they have an option to buy after a year or so, but leasing, seems to be a big play in T-Mobile's playbook. They're leasing Metronet and Lumos. They're not owning and operating that. So it's interesting. It's really a much different strategy that T-Mobile is taking on. They're leasing a lot of their network. The small cells, they lease most of those small cells. Right now, there are some certain parts that they do own outright, like some of the AWS, well, most of the AWS, PCS, that stuff, they own that, right? The C-band, they're going to own that because they paid like $10 billion at the auction. But a good amount of their network, they just don't own it. And I could see that being a problem too, right? When it comes down to operations cost, and that's going to go very high because you're continuing to grow. So it's very interesting, but the price targets continue to lift. They continue to go higher. And, we have Q1 earnings coming up end of April. And then are they going to go higher again? You know what I mean? So it's just an interesting time to really analyze. I'm researching and analyzing more and more and more. And the more I see, right, the more T-Mobile leases. Now, is there a point in time where T-Mobile will own and operate all of their network, where they actually own every single asset? I don't know. And if they do want to do that, that's going to be decades away, because they're clearly not going to do that in this decade. And then, 2030 and beyond, who knows if they even embrace that, right? Because it's very hard to do, right? You have all of your sites, like 82,000 macros hooked up on leased fiber. Not all of it, of course. They have microwave backhaul and such, but it's just really different, right? AT&T and Verizon, they move very differently. They want to own and operate. And if you ask them about leasing, they would probably say you're crazy. They do lease some, right? I got to keep it a buck. They do lease some, right? In some areas they can't get their fiber to, doesn't make sense. They also use microwave backhaul. But for the most part, where it matters the most, where they have their biggest operations and largest shares and stuff, they own and operate, right? And AT&T as well, they own and operate their own stuff. And I think that in itself leads to cost savings. Even though Verizon just sold a good chunk of their macros that they were owning and operating, and they made money back from that, but I just don't know which is the better, right? Verizon and AT&T will tell you owning and operating is better. T-Mobile will tell you leasing is better. So we'll see what happens. T-Mobile continues to celebrate. The stock continues to go up, and the firms are continuing to raise targets. So let me know your thoughts. Like, share, subscribe. See y'all in the next one. Peace.